Wedding day chaos, maid of honor announces she's carrying the millionaire groom's baby. The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor 3 seconds before Victoria Stratton's world did the same. She stood frozen at the altar of the Grand Celestial Hotel's rooftop garden, her ivory Vera Wang gown suddenly feeling like a straitjacket, her breath trapped somewhere between her lungs and her throat. 200 guests had gone silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound itself, that makes the blood rushing through your ears sound like thunder. Her maid of honor, after my engagement party? Victoria's vision blurred at the edges. She remembered that night. Ethan had left early for an emergency business call. Claire had stayed to help clean up, had seemed distant and weird for weeks afterward. Victoria had attributed it to stress from Claire's recent divorce. How spectacularly naive. You left our engagement party, and instead of taking a business call, you slept with my maid of honor? Each word came out like a shard of glass. Ethan stepped forward, hand outstretched. Vic, please. It meant nothing. It was a mistake. Don't touch me. Victoria stepped back, and her heel caught on the train of her dress. She stumbled, and instinctively, Ethan reached out to steady her. She jerked away so violently that several guests gasped. The officiant, Father Thomas, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a moment? Move this somewhere more private? But Victoria was done with private. Done with protecting everyone else's feelings while her own were being shredded in real time. No, she said firmly. Everyone here came to witness a wedding. They dressed up, traveled, cleared their schedules. The least we can do is give them the truth. She turned to face the crowd, her veil floating behind her like a ghost. Show's over, everyone. Turns out the groom has been auditioning for a different role entirely. Father to my best friend's baby. A woman in the third row, Ethan's aunt, Victoria thought, let out a small cry. Someone else whispered loudly, I knew something was off about him. Victoria's younger sister, Josephine, rushed up the aisle, her bridesmaid dress swishing around her legs. Vic, come on. Let's get you out of here. But Victoria couldn't move. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal, the humiliation, the 200 witnesses to her devastation, part of her still wanted Ethan to fix this. To say something that would make it make sense. To prove that the last 3 years hadn't been a complete lie. Is it yours? She asked him directly, her voice barely above a whisper now. Ethan's face crumpled. That was answer enough, but he said it anyway. Yes. The word landed like a physical blow. Victoria felt Josephine's arms around her, heard her sister saying something, but the words were muffled, distant. Everything felt distant except the rapid hammering of her heart and the crushing weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. Claire was still crying, makeup running down her face in black rivers. I wanted to tell you so many times. But I was scared, and then I found out about the baby, and I didn't know what to do, Anne. You had 6 months, Victoria cut her off. 6 months to tell me. And you chose now? You chose my wedding day? Because I couldn't let you legally tie yourself to him without knowing. Claire's voice rose desperately. You would have married him, and then found out, and it would have been so much worse. At least now you have a choice. A choice? Victoria let out a laugh that sounded unhinged even to her own ears. You think this is giving me a choice? You think humiliating me in front of everyone I know is somehow a kindness? I think it's better than letting you marry a man who doesn't deserve you, Claire said quietly. Victoria's father finally stood, his face thunderous. Ethan, I think you need to leave. Now. Mr. Stratton, please, if I could just. Now. Robert Stratton's voice boomed across the rooftop. He was a federal judge, a man accustomed to being obeyed, and his tone left no room for argument. Ethan looked at Victoria one more time, his eyes pleading. I love you, Vic. I know I have no right to say that after what I've done, but it's true. I love you. You don't get to say that to me ever again, Victoria replied, her voice ice cold now, shock giving way to a fury so pure it steadied her. You don't get to say anything to me. Get out. As Ethan walked down the aisle, alone, humiliated, the guests parting for him like the Red Sea, Victoria stood at the altar in her wedding gown, her engagement ring suddenly feeling like a manacle. She twisted it off her finger and looked at it. 4 carats, emerald cut, set in platinum. He'd had it custom designed. She'd thought it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Now it just looked like expensive bribery. She turned to Claire, who was still standing there, still crying, still pregnant with the baby that had destroyed everything. How far along are you? Victoria asked. 22 weeks. So you're keeping it? Yes. Victoria nodded slowly. The math was simple and devastating. Claire was too far along for an abortion, even if she'd wanted one. This baby, Ethan's baby, would be born. Would exist. Would be a permanent reminder of this betrayal. Then you need to leave too, Victoria said. And I need you to understand something, Claire. We're not friends anymore. We're not anything. You're dead to me. Vic, please. Go. The scream tore from Victoria's throat, raw and primal, and Claire finally moved, hurrying down the aisle with her head down, her hands protectively over her stomach. Victoria stood alone at the altar, still in her wedding dress, still holding the ring that was supposed to symbolize eternal love. 200 people stared at her with mixtures of pity, shock, and hunger for the next chapter of this disaster. Josephine appeared beside her again, gentle but firm. Come on, sis. Let's get you out of that dress. But Victoria shook her head. Because a thought had just occurred to her, a terrible, wonderful, absolutely crazy thought. The reception was already paid for. The Grand Celestial's Imperial Ballroom was set up with dinner for 200, a live band, a cake that had cost more than some people's cars. Ethan had insisted on paying for everything, had spent nearly $500,000 on this wedding. Why should any of it go to waste? Victoria raised her eyes to the crowd and lifted her voice. The wedding's cancelled, obviously. But the reception is still happening. Everyone is still invited. The food's paid for, the bar's open, and I'll be damned if I let Ethan Corleone's money go to waste. She turned to the band leader, who'd been standing awkwardly to the side. You're still getting paid either way, right? The man nodded uncertainly. Then play something upbeat. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? Josephine asked carefully. Victoria looked at her sister, and for the first time since Claire had dropped that champagne glass, she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, not exactly. But it was real. My freedom. The Imperial Ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland, all white florals, crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures that were now melting under the weight of the day's chaos. Victoria stood at the entrance, still in her wedding gown, greeting guests as they filed in with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed fascination. Victoria, darling, are you sure about this? Her mother appeared at her elbow, voice low and urgent. Eleanor Stratton was the picture of refined composure even now, though Victoria could see the tiny muscle twitching in her jaw, the only tell that she was barely holding it together. Completely sure. Victoria accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and drained half of it in one go. The bubbles burned down her throat, but the burn felt good. Real. Why should 200 people go hungry because my fiancé is a lying bastard? Language, Victoria. Despite everything, Victoria almost laughed. Her world had just imploded in the most public way possible, and her mother was worried about profanity. Some things never changed. Eleanor sighed, smoothing down her champagne-colored mother-of-the-bride dress. At 53, she was still stunning, with silver blonde hair styled in an elegant chignon and the kind of posture that came from decades of finishing school and charity galas. What I mean is, wouldn't you rather be somewhere private? Processing this? Your Aunt Margaret has already left, and I heard the Vanderbilts talking about. Let them talk, Victoria interrupted. They were going to talk anyway. At least this way I control the narrative. That wasn't entirely true, and they both knew it. Victoria had no control over anything right now. But standing here, forcing herself to face the pitying looks and whispered conversations, felt better than hiding. Felt like the only power move she had left. Her father approached, having divested himself of his suit jacket. Robert Stratton was an imposing man, 6'3", with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. He'd built his career on being unflappable, on delivering verdicts that could destroy lives without so much as a tremor in his voice. But right now, he looked every one of his 57 years. "Sweetheart," he said gently, and the tenderness in his voice nearly broke Victoria's carefully constructed composure. "I can have the hotel clear everyone out. We can end this right now." Victoria shook her head. "No, Dad. I need to do this." What she didn't say was that she needed to prove, to herself, to everyone, that she wasn't broken. That Ethan Corleone hadn't destroyed her. Even if, deep down, she felt like she was held together with nothing but spite and expensive champagne. Robert studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But I'm staying right here. And if anyone says one word out of line, you'll hold them in contempt of court." Victoria managed a weak smile. "Something like that." He kissed her forehead, and Victoria had to blink rapidly to keep from crying. Josephine materialized with another glass of champagne, already having consumed her first. At 26, 2 years younger than Victoria, Josie was everything their mother had tried to mold Victoria into and failed. Spontaneous where Victoria was planned, artistic where Victoria was analytical, comfortable with chaos where Victoria craved control. "Okay, new plan," Josie announced, her dark eyes flashing with the kind of mischief that usually preceded terrible decisions. "We get absolutely wasted, make spectacularly bad choices, and turn this tragedy into the party of the century. I'm talking dancing on tables, stealing the ice sculptures, maybe burning your wedding dress in the hotel courtyard." Josephine Marie Stratton, Eleanor said sharply. "What?" "I'm just trying to help Vic embrace the moment." Josie threw an arm around Victoria's shoulders. "Come on, sis. You've spent 3 years being perfect Victoria, planning the perfect wedding to the perfect man. Look where that got you. Maybe it's time to be a little imperfect." There was truth in that, Victoria thought. She'd spent so long trying to build the ideal life, the successful career as a corporate attorney, the handsome millionaire fiancé, the picture-perfect relationship. She'd ignored the small warning signs, the times when Ethan had been distant or evasive, because acknowledging them would have meant admitting that her perfect plan had cracks. And now the whole thing had shattered anyway. "I'm not burning the dress," Victoria said finally. "It cost $30,000. That's the spirit. Fiscal responsibility even in crisis." Josie clinked her glass against Victoria's. "But seriously, how are you actually doing? And don't give me the brave face. I'm your sister. I can tell when you're falling apart." Victoria opened her mouth to deliver some platitude, but what came out was, "I keep thinking about what I missed. What I should have seen. Claire was acting weird for months, and I wrote it off. I was so focused on the wedding planning, on making everything perfect, that I didn't notice my best friend was carrying my fiancé's baby." "Ex-fiancé," Josie corrected firmly. "And this is not your fault, Vic. They're the ones who betrayed you. Both of them. I know that intellectually. But emotionally." Victoria trailed off, because how could she explain the guilt that sat like a stone in her chest? The feeling that if she'd been more attentive, more present, less obsessed with seating charts and flower arrangements, maybe she would have prevented this. A commotion at the ballroom entrance caught their attention. A man had arrived, late, apparently, because he was looking around with confusion at the lack of wedding ceremony. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that was slightly too long and looked like he'd tried to tame it with limited success. His suit was expensive but rumpled, like he'd slept in it on a plane. Victoria didn't recognize him. "Who's that?" she asked Josie. Her sister squinted. "No idea. maybe one of Ethan's colleagues? The man spotted them and started walking over, and as he got closer, Victoria noticed details she'd missed from a distance. Sharp green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. A small scar above his left eyebrow. An expression that suggested he was perpetually amused by some private joke. "I'm looking for the wedding," he said when he reached them, his voice carrying a trace of an accent Victoria couldn't quite place. "British, maybe? But I'm getting the distinct impression I've missed something important." "You could say that," Josie replied, looking him up and down with open appreciation. "And you are?" "Sebastian Deckard." He extended a hand. "I went to university with Ethan. We've kept in touch sporadically over the years. He invited me months ago, and I happened to be in the country, so." He trailed off, seeming to notice Victoria's wedding dress and the general air of disaster. "But I'm guessing the wedding didn't happen?" "Perceptive," Victoria said, not bothering to shake his hand. The last thing she needed was to make small talk with one of Ethan's friends. The groom knocked up the maid of honor. "Wedding's off. Reception still happening. Help yourself to the open bar." If Sebastian was shocked, he didn't show it. He just nodded slowly, processing. Ethan always was an idiot. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Or at all, really." There was something in his tone, a genuine sympathy without the cloying pity she'd been getting from everyone else, that made Victoria actually look at him. "Really look. You're not surprised," she observed. "About Ethan's capacity for self-destruction?" "Not particularly." Sebastian's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "We were roommates at Oxford. I watched him sabotage more good things than I can count. Though usually with less dramatic flair. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment below telling me what you think of Sebastian. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to see how this all unfolds." "Great," Victoria muttered. "So I was just the latest in a long line of women he screwed over?" "Actually, from what Ethan told me, you were different. He genuinely seemed to love you. Which somehow makes this whole thing worse." Sebastian glanced around the ballroom. "Look, I barely know you, so feel free to tell me to sod off, but, are you actually okay?" The question, asked so directly and without pretense, caught Victoria off guard. Everyone else had been tiptoeing around her, offering empty platitudes or avoiding the topic entirely. But this stranger, this friend of the man who'd just humiliated her, was asking the real question. "No," she admitted. "I'm really not." "Fair enough." Sebastian grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and handed her one, even though she was still holding her previous glass. "Then I propose we get properly drunk and you tell me every terrible thing about Ethan that you've been too polite to say for the last 3 years. I'll contribute my own stories of his idiocy, and by the end of the night, you'll wonder what you ever saw in him." Josie laughed. "I like this guy. Vic, keep him." Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. "You do realize you just admitted you're here to trash-talk your friend?" "Former friend," Sebastian corrected. "Knocking up your mate's fiancé is pretty much an automatic friendship termination. Plus, I was never that fond of him anyway. He still owes me 200 quid from a poker game in 2015. Against all odds, Victoria felt some of the crushing weight on her chest lighten. Maybe it was the champagne hitting her empty stomach. Maybe it was the absurdity of the situation. Or maybe it was just nice to talk to someone who wasn't looking at her like she was a fragile piece of china about to shatter. "Okay," she said. "You're on. But I'm going to need more champagne. I'd be disappointed if you didn't." As Sebastian wandered off to procure more drinks, Josie leaned in close. "Okay, so, that guy is hot. Like, really hot. Please tell me you noticed." "Josie, I literally just got left at the altar." "Which makes you newly single and entitled to rebound with a gorgeous British stranger who hates your ex." Josie waggled her eyebrows. "I'm just saying, best revenge is living well and all that." Victoria rolled her eyes, but she couldn't deny that Sebastian was attractive. In a disheveled, slightly dangerous sort of way that was completely different from Ethan's polished perfection. Ethan always looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, carefully groomed, expertly styled, not a hair out of place. Sebastian looked like he'd fought his way through life and come out the other side with a smirk and a good story. Not that it mattered. The last thing Victoria needed was another man complicating her life. Her phone buzzed in the hidden pocket of her dress, because of course she'd insisted on pockets. A text from an unknown number. "Vic, please. We need to talk. I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance to explain. I love you. E." Victoria stared at the message, feeling nothing. That was almost worse than anger, the complete absence of any feeling at all when she saw his name. 3 years together, and it had taken less than an hour for love to turn into numbness. She blocked the number and drained her champagne. Sebastian returned with a bottle instead of glasses. "The bartender took pity on me when I explained the situation. Figured we'd eliminate the middleman." Efficient, Victoria approved. "So, Sebastian Deckard. What do you do when you're not crashing cancelled weddings?" "I'm an investigative journalist. Freelance. I chase stories that most people don't want told." He poured them both generous measures. "Currently working on something about corporate fraud, which is why I'm in the States." "Boring stuff, really." "Doesn't sound boring," Victoria said. She was a corporate attorney herself, had spent the last 5 years at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Most of her work involved mergers and acquisitions, the kind of dry legal maneuvering that made her family's eyes glaze over at dinner parties. "It's satisfying work," Sebastian allowed. "Taking down people who think they're untouchable. Making sure the truth comes out." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "What about you? What does Victoria Stratton do when she's not planning weddings that don't happen?" "Corporate law. Mergers, acquisitions, the occasional securities issue." Victoria heard how flat her voice sounded. She'd loved her job once, had been excited about making partners someday. But lately, even before today's disaster, it had all felt hollow. Going through motions, billing hours, building someone else's empire. "Sounds thrilling," Sebastian said with a straight face. "It's not," Victoria admitted. "But it's stable. Prestigious. Good money. All the things that matter," Sebastian said, but there was a hint of something in his voice, not quite mockery, but close. "They do matter," Victoria defended, feeling suddenly defensive. "Not all of us can chase excitement and noble causes for a living." "True. Someone has to help rich people get richer." Sebastian's eyes glinted with amusement. "Sorry, that was unfair. I'm sure your work is very important." Victoria knew she should be offended, but instead she found herself laughing. "God, you're an ass. I've been told." He clinked his glass against hers. "But I'm an honest ass. Which is more than your ex can say." The reminder of Ethan sobered her. Victoria looked around the ballroom, at the guests who were starting to relax now, helping themselves to the elaborate buffet, chatting in small groups. Her wedding reception, happening without a wedding. Without a groom. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said suddenly. "You said Ethan used to sabotage good things. Did he ever? Was there ever anyone else? Before me?" Sebastian's expression became guarded. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did he have a history of cheating? Because I need to know if I was just spectacularly stupid or if he was just spectacularly good at lying." There was a long pause. Then Sebastian sighed. "At Oxford, there was a girl. Lovely person. They dated for 2 years. He cheated on her with her roommate 3 months before graduation." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. "And you stayed friends with him after that?" "I was young and stupid, and he was charismatic and fun when he wanted to be. By the time I realized what kind of person he really was." Sebastian shrugged. "We'd drifted apart anyway. I moved to London, he moved to Silicon Valley. We kept in touch via social media and the occasional email, but we weren't close. When the wedding invitation came, I almost didn't come. You should have trusted your instincts, Victoria said bitterly. Maybe you should have too. Victoria's head snapped up, ready to be angry, but Sebastian's expression was gentle, not accusatory. I'm not trying to blame you, he said quickly. But I'm guessing there were signs. Small things you explained away because you wanted to believe in him. Because the alternative was too painful. He was right, and Victoria hated that he was right. There had been signs. Late nights at the office that happened too frequently. The way Ethan's phone was always face down on the table. His defensiveness when she asked about his day. Claire's weird behavior over the past 6 months. She'd seen all of it and chosen to ignore it. I'm an idiot, Victoria whispered. No. You're someone who loved and trusted and got betrayed for it. That doesn't make you an idiot. That makes you human. Before Victoria could respond, the band started playing, something upbeat and jazzy that felt absurdly cheerful given the circumstances. Several guests moved to the dance floor, apparently deciding that if the bride was going to pretend everything was fine, they might as well play along. Victoria watched them, feeling disconnected from her own life. This was supposed to be her first dance with Ethan. Their song, The Way You Look Tonight, was queued up with the band. She'd spent hours practicing in her living room, making sure she wouldn't step on his feet, planning the perfect moment. Another dream turned to ash. Dance with me, Sebastian said suddenly. What? Dance with me. You're at your own wedding reception in a gorgeous dress. Might as well use it. He stood and extended his hand, the gesture both casual and somehow formal. Victoria looked at his outstretched hand, then at the dance floor, then back at him. I don't even know you. Exactly. I'm a blank slate. No history, no baggage, no betrayal. Just a dance. Josie appeared out of nowhere, pushing Victoria toward Sebastian. Go. Dance. I insist. Before she could overthink it, Victoria put her hand in Sebastian's and let him lead her to the dance floor. He moved with surprising grace for someone who looked like he'd rather be investigating corruption than waltzing at a non-wedding. I'm not very good at this, Victoria admitted as they began to move. Lucky for you, I am. Sebastian's hand was firm on her waist, confident without being presumptuous. Boarding school. They made us take ballroom dance lessons. I hated every minute, but apparently it stuck. They swayed together, and Victoria was acutely aware of how different this felt from dancing with Ethan. Sebastian was taller, his frame more solid. He smelled like expensive cologne cut with something sharper, whiskey, maybe, or the cigarettes she'd noticed in his jacket pocket. So, Sebastian said after a moment. On a scale of 1 to 10, how badly do you want to murder your ex-fiancé? Victoria surprised herself by laughing. 11. 12 on bad days. Understandable. What about the friend? The same. Maybe higher. Victoria's grip tightened on Sebastian's shoulder. Is that terrible? She's pregnant, and I hate her. It's honest. And given that she slept with your fiancé and then announced her pregnancy at your wedding, I'd say your feelings are more than justified. They moved in silence for a few moments, and Victoria found herself relaxing incrementally. The champagne was helping, but so was this, the simple act of moving to music, of being held by someone who expected nothing from her except to dance. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not treating me like I'm broken. Sebastian's eyes met hers, and there was something in them, an understanding, maybe, or recognition. Like he knew what it felt like to be shattered and forced to pretend you were whole. We're all broken, he said simply. Some of us are just better at hiding it than others. The song ended, and Victoria stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they'd been. How natural it had felt. She started, but she didn't actually know what she should do. Get drunk seemed like the obvious answer, but even that felt complicated. You should eat something, Sebastian finished for her. When's the last time you had actual food? Victoria tried to remember. Breakfast? Had there been breakfast? The morning had been such a blur of hair and makeup and getting into the dress that she honestly couldn't recall. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sebastian steered her toward the buffet. Come on. Let's get some food in you before the champagne puts you on the floor. As they loaded plates with food Victoria had chosen months ago, back when she still thought she'd be eating it as Ethan's wife, her phone buzzed again. Another text from a different number. Victoria, it's Claire. I know you blocked Ethan. I know you hate me. But please, can we talk? I need you to understand. Victoria deleted the message without reading the rest and blocked that number too. She didn't need to understand. She didn't want their explanations or their justifications. She just wanted to forget this day had ever happened. But as she looked around the ballroom, at her family, at the guests, at Sebastian Deckard, who was surprisingly easy to talk to, Victoria realized something. Forgetting wasn't an option. This day would be part of her story forever, a chapter she couldn't erase. The only question was what came next. And as she caught Sebastian watching her with those perceptive green eyes, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the next chapter might be more interesting than she'd planned. Victoria woke up the next morning in her childhood bedroom at her parents' estate, still wearing her wedding dress. The bodice was cutting into her ribs, the tulle of the skirt was twisted around her legs like a cocoon, and her head felt like it had been used as a drum in a marching band. She sat up slowly, every movement sending fresh waves of nausea through her system. Memories from the previous night filtered back in fragments, dancing with Sebastian, doing tequila shots with Josie, giving a speech where she'd thanked everyone for coming to the best non-wedding of the century, and then, nothing. Complete blackout. Her phone showed 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages. She didn't need to check to know they were from Ethan, Claire, concerned relatives, and probably a few reporters who'd gotten wind of the story. Millionaire tech mogul's wedding implodes after maid of honor reveals pregnancy. Victoria could see the headlines already. By Monday, this would be all over social media. Her humiliation, immortalized on the internet forever. There was a soft knock on the door, and Josie entered with a tray containing coffee, aspirin, and what looked like her mother's famous hangover cure, a truly disgusting smoothie made with raw eggs, hot sauce, and God knows what else. You're alive, Josie observed, setting the tray on the nightstand. That's something. Define alive, Victoria croaked. Her mouth tasted like something had died in it. What happened last night? After the dancing? Josie's grin was positively wicked. Oh, you don't remember? This is amazing. Josie. What did I do? Well, after you danced with the hot British guy approximately 6 times, you decided it would be a great idea to auction off your engagement ring to the highest bidder. Victoria's stomach dropped. I did what? Relax, Dad intervened before it got too far. The ring is in the hotel safe. But you did get 3 bids, including one for $50,000 from Mrs. Henderson, who apparently has always hated Ethan. Josie sat on the edge of the bed, her expression softening. How are you really doing, Vic? I'm in a wedding dress in my childhood bedroom the morning after my wedding that didn't happen because my fiancé got my best friend pregnant. Victoria reached for the coffee with shaking hands. How do you think I'm doing? Fair point. Josie was quiet for a moment. Claire's been calling. And texting. She wants to explain. There's nothing to explain. She slept with Ethan. She got pregnant. She waited 6 months to tell me. The end. She said it only happened once. I don't care if it happened once or 100 times, Victoria snapped. She betrayed me. They both did. And honestly, the fact that it was only once somehow makes it worse. Like they destroyed everything for one drunken mistake. Josie nodded, accepting this. And Ethan? What about him? He showed up here this morning. Dad sent him away, but he left a letter. It's downstairs. Victoria's first instinct was to say she didn't want it, that Ethan could take his letter and shove it somewhere anatomically improbable. But curiosity won out. What does it say? No idea. Dad wouldn't let me steam it open. Josie looked genuinely disappointed about this. But speaking of Dad, he wants to talk to you. He's in his study. After Josie left, Victoria forced herself out of the dress, a process that required scissors for some of the more stubborn buttons, and into jeans and a sweater. Her reflection in the mirror was a disaster: smudged makeup, hair that looked like a bird's nest, eyes puffy from crying she didn't remember doing. She looked like how she felt. Destroyed. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Her parents' estate in Connecticut was a sprawling property they'd bought when Victoria was in high school, all marble floors and high ceilings and windows that overlooked Long Island Sound. It had always felt more like a museum than a home, but right now, Victoria was grateful for the space, for the distance from the city and the disaster she'd left behind. Her father was in his study, as promised, sitting behind the massive mahogany desk that had belonged to his father before him. He looked up when Victoria entered, and his expression was carefully neutral, his courtroom face. "Sit down, sweetheart." Victoria sat, feeling like she was about to be cross-examined. Josie said Ethan was here. He was. I told him if he ever set foot on this property again, I'd have him arrested for trespassing. Robert slid an envelope across the desk. But he did leave this. Victoria stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Her name was written across the front in Ethan's familiar handwriting, clean, precise, the penmanship of someone who'd attended expensive schools and been taught that presentation mattered. "I don't want it," she said. "I didn't think you would. But I also didn't think it was my place to throw it away." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay? Did you really love him, or did you love the idea of him?" The question caught Victoria off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "A fair one, I think." Her father's voice was gentle but firm. "You spent 3 years with Ethan Corleone. You accepted his proposal. You planned an elaborate wedding. But in all that time, I never once saw you look at him the way your mother looks at me. I never saw real passion, real connection. I saw compatibility. Mutual benefit. A partnership that looked good on paper." Victoria wanted to argue, to defend her relationship, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. Wasn't he? Isn't it? Robert stood and walked around the desk, sitting in the chair beside Victoria instead of across from her. "You're 28 years old. You're brilliant, beautiful, and tougher than you think you are. Yesterday was horrible, but it doesn't define you. You get to decide what comes next." Victoria wanted to believe him. But all she felt was empty, hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything essential and left only the shell. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them, raised voices, someone arguing with Eleanor. Then the study door burst open, and Sebastian Deckard strode in, looking harried and determined. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But we have a problem." Victoria stared at him. "What are you doing here? How did you even know where I live?" "Your sister gave me the address. And before you ask, yes, I know this is inappropriate and intrusive, but you need to see this." He pulled out his phone and handed it to Victoria. On the screen was a news article from a gossip website, exclusive, "Inside the Wedding Disaster, Maid of Honor's Tell-All Interview." Victoria's blood ran cold. She clicked on the article, and Claire's face filled the screen, a video interview, professionally shot, clearly done in the hours after the wedding. "I know people are going to judge me," Claire said in the video, tears streaming down her face. "But I want everyone to understand that this wasn't some sordid affair. Ethan and I fell in love. It wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, but it happened. And yes, the timing was terrible, but I couldn't let Victoria marry him without knowing the truth. I did this for her, to save her from making a huge mistake." Victoria felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She's claiming they're in love? That she did me a favor? Sebastian took the phone back, his expression grim. It gets worse. Keep reading. Victoria scrolled down. The article went on to detail Claire's version of events, how she and Ethan had been fighting their undeniable connection for months, how Victoria had been emotionally absent and more in love with the idea of marriage than with Ethan himself, how the pregnancy had forced them to confront their true feelings. This is insane, Victoria said numbly. She's completely rewriting history. She's also doing interviews with 3 other outlets, Sebastian said. By tomorrow, her version of events is going to be everywhere. And here's the thing, it's compelling. Tragic lovers kept apart by circumstance, finally forced to admit their truth. People are going to eat it up. Why do you care? Victoria asked him. You barely know me. Sebastian hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Because I know what it's like to have your story stolen from you. To have someone else control the narrative while you're too devastated to defend yourself. His jaw tightened. And because what she's doing is bullshit, and someone needs to call her on it. Robert, who'd been watching this exchange with interest, spoke up. You're a journalist. I am. And you want to help my daughter tell her side of the story. I want to help her destroy the fiction that Claire is spinning, Sebastian corrected. There's a difference. Victoria looked between them, her mind racing. The smart thing to do would be to stay quiet, to let the gossip die down naturally, to take the high road. That's what her mother would advise. What her corporate training had taught her. But the smart thing had gotten her humiliated at the altar. Maybe it was time to try something different. What did you have in mind? Victoria asked Sebastian. His smile was sharp and dangerous. An exclusive interview. Your story, in your words, before Claire's version becomes the official record. I have contacts at major publications. I can get you a platform. And what do you get out of this? A hell of a story, Sebastian said honestly. And the satisfaction of watching Claire's narrative fall apart. He makes a good point, Robert said, surprising Victoria. Right now, you're the victim. But if you don't speak up, Claire turns you into the villain, the cold, emotionally absent fiancé who drove Ethan into another woman's arms. Is that the story you want written about you? It wasn't. God, it wasn't. Victoria thought about Claire's interview, about the way she'd positioned herself as the tragic heroine. About Ethan, who was probably relieved to have someone else taking the blame. About the 200 people who'd witnessed her humiliation and would spend years gossiping about what really happened. She was so tired of being careful. Of being appropriate. Of taking the high road while everyone else took shortcuts. What do you think Victoria should do? Should she fight back or stay silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I love hearing from you guys. Okay, Victoria said, making the decision before she could second-guess herself. I'll do the interview. But I want editorial approval over the final piece. Sebastian shook his head. I don't work that way. You tell me your story, I write it honestly and fairly, but I won't let you sanitize it. Then why should I trust you? Because I'm the only person in this situation who doesn't have a personal stake in lying to you. Sebastian's green eyes were steady on hers. Your ex-fiancé lied. Your best friend lied. I'm offering you the truth, warts and all. Take it or leave it. Victoria studied him, trying to figure out his angle. Everyone had an angle. But all she saw in his face was a kind of brutal honesty that was almost refreshing. Fine, she said. When do we start? Now, if you're up for it. Victoria, maybe you should take some time to think about this, Eleanor said from the doorway. Victoria hadn't even noticed her mother arrive. Going public could make things worse. Worse than being painted as a frigid workaholic who drove her fiancé into another woman's arms? Victoria stood, feeling something like determination replacing the numbness. I don't think so, Mom. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but Robert put a hand on her arm. Let her do this, Elle. Our daughter is tougher than we give her credit for. Sebastian pulled out a digital recorder. All right, Victoria Stratton. Tell me your story. And don't leave anything out. So she did. Victoria talked for 3 hours, barely stopping for breath. She told him about meeting Ethan at a charity gala, about their whirlwind courtship, about the proposal that had seemed so romantic at the time. She told him about the small moments when she'd sensed something was off but had ignored her instincts. About Claire's strange behavior over the past 6 months. About the wedding day itself, the champagne glass shattering, the announcement, the look on Ethan's face when he didn't deny it. Sebastian listened, occasionally asking questions but mostly just letting her talk. He was good at this, Victoria realized. At making her feel heard without making her feel judged. Can I ask you something personal? Sebastian said when she finally ran out of words. Haven't I answered enough personal questions? Not about the wedding. About you. He leaned forward, his expression intent. What do you actually want, Victoria? Not what you're supposed to want, not what would make a good story. What do you want for your life? The question should have been simple. But Victoria found she didn't have an answer. What did she want? A month ago, she would have said she wanted to marry Ethan, make partner at her firm, start a family. The standard markers of success. But those had been goals, not wants. Check boxes on a list, not genuine desires. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long following the plan that I'm not sure I know what I actually want anymore. Then maybe that's where you start, Sebastian said gently. Figure out what you want. Not what you should want. What you actually want. Before Victoria could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but she recognized the area code, it was local. Victoria, it's Ethan. I know you blocked me, but I'm using a different phone. Please, I'm begging you, don't do the interview. We can work this out privately. I still love you. We can get past this. Victoria showed the text to Sebastian, who raised an eyebrow. He's worried. Good. He should be. Once your interview goes live, his reputation is going to take a serious hit. Sebastian's smile was predatory. Tech mogul who cheats on his fiancée with her best friend. His investors are going to love that. Victoria hadn't even thought about the professional implications for Ethan. His company, Corleone Technologies, had just gone public 6 months ago. He was the face of the brand, the visionary CEO who gave inspiring TED Talks about innovation and integrity. The irony was almost funny. How soon can we publish? Victoria asked. I can have it written and fact-checked by tonight. It could be live by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. Less than 48 hours after the wedding that wasn't. Victoria thought about Ethan's text, about his plea for privacy and second chances. About Claire's interview painting herself as a tragic romantic. About her own humiliation becoming internet gossip. And she thought about what her father had said, you get to decide what comes next. Do it, Victoria said. Publish it tomorrow. Sebastian nodded, standing. You won't regret this. I already regret everything, Victoria said with a bitter laugh. What's one more thing? But as Sebastian left, after exchanging contact information and promising to send her a draft before publication, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt since Claire had dropped that champagne glass. Control. She might not be able to change what had happened, but she could damn well control the story that came after. Josie appeared in the doorway as soon as Sebastian was gone. So, you're really doing this? Going nuclear? I'm telling my side of the story, Victoria corrected. Same thing. Josie came in and flopped onto the sofa. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Claire's interview was bullshit, and someone needs to call her on it. Do you think I'm being vindictive? Oh, absolutely. But sometimes vindictive is the right response. Josie's expression grew serious. Vic, you've spent your whole life being the good girl. Following the rules, meeting expectations, never making waves. Look where it got you. Maybe it's time to try something different. It was almost exactly what Victoria had been thinking earlier. And coming from Josie, who'd spent her whole life being the rebellious one, it felt like permission. Permission to be angry. To fight back. To stop caring what everyone thought and start caring about what she needed. Victoria picked up Ethan's letter from where her father had left it on the desk. She held it for a long moment, feeling its weight. Then she tore it in half without opening it and threw it in the trash. Whatever excuses, justifications, or apologies it contained, she didn't need to hear them. Ethan had made his choice. Now she was making hers. Her phone rang, Sebastian's number. Already have second thoughts? Victoria answered. No, but you might. His voice was tense. I just got a call from a contact at page 6. Ethan's holding a press conference in 2 hours. He's going to make a statement about the wedding. Victoria's stomach dropped. What kind of statement? My source doesn't know, but if I had to guess? He's going to try to get ahead of your interview. Control the narrative before you can. Can he do that? He can try. But Victoria, if he makes claims that you then contradict, it's going to turn into a he said she said situation. The impact of your interview will be diminished. Victoria's mind raced. So what do we do? There was a pause. Then Sebastian said, how do you feel about crashing a press conference? Despite everything, Victoria smiled. Tell me when and where. Oh, this is getting good. Do you think Victoria should confront Ethan publicly? Let me know what you'd do in her situation. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is your sign, hit that button because this story is about to get wild. The press conference was being held at the Corleone Technologies headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, a gleaming steel and glass building that Ethan had commissioned 3 years ago, right around the time he'd started dating Victoria. She'd attended the building's opening gala, had smiled for photos in the lobby, had felt proud to be on his arm. Now, standing outside that same building with Sebastian at her side, she felt nothing but cold determination. You don't have to do this, Sebastian said, though his eyes suggested he very much hoped she would. We can still publish the interview on schedule and let it speak for itself. No. Victoria adjusted her sunglasses, oversized Chanel that hid most of her face. She'd changed into a sharp black pantsuit, had fixed her makeup, had pulled her dark hair into a severe bun. Wore paint and armor. If Ethan wants to control the narrative, he's going to have to do it with me in the room. They entered through the main lobby, where a security guard tried to stop them. I'm sorry, miss, but the press conference is for credentialed media only. She's with me, Sebastian said smoothly, flashing a press badge from the Guardian. She's my research assistant. The guard looked skeptical but waved them through. They followed the stream of reporters to the third-floor conference room, a space Victoria recognized from various company events. It had been set up with a podium at the front, cameras arranged in rows, and seating for about 50 journalists. Ethan hadn't arrived yet, but his PR team was there, sharp-suited professionals who were currently having what looked like a heated argument in the corner. Victoria recognized Amanda Cho, Ethan's head of communications, a woman who'd always been coldly professional during their few interactions. There's going to be security, Sebastian murmured as they took seats in the back row. Once Ethan sees you, they'll probably try to remove you. Let them try. Sebastian's smile was appreciative. I'm starting to see why your father's a judge. That courtroom authority must run in the family. Before Victoria could respond, the room quieted. Ethan had entered through a side door, flanked by 2 men Victoria didn't recognize, lawyers, probably, or crisis management consultants. He looked terrible, which gave Victoria a small, petty sense of satisfaction. His eyes were bloodshot, his normally perfect hair was disheveled, and his suit looked slept in. Good. Let him suffer. Ethan took his position at the podium, and the camera started flashing immediately. He cleared his throat, gripping the sides of the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice hoarse. "I know there's been a lot of speculation and gossip surrounding the events of yesterday, and I wanted to address them directly rather than let rumors and half-truths shape the narrative." Victoria's hands clenched into fists. Half-truths. As if what happened was subject to interpretation. "First, I want to apologize to Victoria Stratton," Ethan continued, and Victoria felt Sebastian tense beside her. "What happened at our wedding was inexcusable. I betrayed her trust in the worst possible way, and I take full responsibility for my actions." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several reporters were typing furiously on their laptops. However, Ethan said, and there it was, the pivot Victoria had been expecting. "I also want to clarify some of the facts that have been misrepresented in the media. My relationship with Claire Harrison was not an ongoing affair. It was a single incident that occurred during a particularly difficult time in my relationship with Victoria." Victoria stood up. She didn't plan it, didn't think about it. One moment she was sitting, and the next she was on her feet, and every camera in the room swung toward her. Ethan's face went white. "Victoria. A difficult time?" Victoria's voice cut through the room like a knife. She pulled off her sunglasses, letting everyone see her face, her fury. "What exactly made it difficult, Ethan? The fact that I was working 70-hour weeks planning our wedding? Or the fact that I actually trusted you?" Amanda Cho started moving toward Victoria, but Sebastian stood as well, physically blocking her path while keeping his phone up, recording everything. "Miss Stratton, this is a private press conference," Amanda began. "Private?" Victoria laughed, the sound harsh. "You called every major media outlet in New York to watch my ex-fiancé spin lies about our relationship. Nothing about this is private." Ethan held up a hand to stop Amanda. "Vic, please. Can we talk about this privately? Like we were going to talk privately after the wedding?" "Oh wait, we didn't have a wedding. Because my best friend announced she was pregnant with your child." Victoria started walking toward the podium, and the crowd parted for her instinctively. "You said you wanted to clarify the facts, Ethan. So let's clarify. When exactly did this single incident occur?" "Victoria, this isn't the place. Answer the question." Her voice was steel. "When did you sleep with Claire?" Ethan's jaw worked. He looked at his lawyers, who were frantically shaking their heads, then back at Victoria. 6 months ago. After our engagement party. The engagement party where you told me you had an emergency business call and left early." "Yes." "And where did this single incident happen?" "Victoria." "Where, Ethan?" His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Our apartment." The room erupted. Reporters were shouting questions, cameras flashing, and Victoria felt like she might vomit. Their apartment. The home they'd shared for 2 years. The bed they'd slept in together. "Jesus Christ," Sebastian muttered behind her. Victoria gripped the edge of a nearby chair to steady herself. "You brought her to our home." "I was drunk, I wasn't thinking." "You weren't thinking for 6 months?" Victoria's voice rose. "Because that's how long you both hid this from me. That's how long you looked me in the eye every single day and lied." "I wanted to tell you," Ethan said desperately. "So many times, I almost told you. But I was scared of losing you. You lost me the second you touched her." Victoria was crying now, angry tears that she couldn't stop. "And you know what the worst part is? I would have forgiven you. If you'd told me right away, if you'd been honest, I might have actually forgiven you. But you didn't. You let me plan a wedding, buy a dress, send out invitations, all while knowing you'd betrayed me." "I'm sorry." Ethan's voice broke. "God, Vic, I'm so sorry. I love you. I never stopped loving you. You don't know what love is." Victoria wiped her eyes, not caring that her makeup was running, that she probably looked like a mess on camera. "Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't lie." And love sure as hell doesn't let someone you claim to care about get humiliated in front of 200 people because you're too much of a coward to tell the truth. She turned to leave, but Ethan came around the podium, reaching for her arm. Please, Vic. Please, just give me a chance to make this right. Sebastian was there instantly, putting himself between them. I think you've done enough. Who the hell are you? Ethan demanded. Someone who actually gives a damn about what Victoria wants, Sebastian shot back. Which is clearly not you. For a moment, Victoria thought Ethan might actually throw a punch. His hands were clenched, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. But his lawyers grabbed him, pulling him back, whispering urgent warnings in his ear. Victoria let Sebastian guide her out of the conference room, through the lobby, and onto the street. The cold February air hit her like a slap, and she gasped, suddenly aware that she couldn't catch her breath. Whoa, hey. Sebastian's hands were on her shoulders, steadying her. Look at me, Victoria. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. She tried, but her chest felt too tight, her lungs too small. I can't breathe. Why are you really helping me? I mean, yes, it's a good story, but you could have gotten that without getting personally involved. You didn't have to bring me to that press conference. You didn't have to defend me when Ethan reached for me. So what's your angle? Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. About 5 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Sophie. We'd been together since university, and I thought we were solid. I was working on this massive investigative piece about corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, spending long hours tracking down sources, following leads. He paused. While I was doing that, she was sleeping with my editor. God, Sebastian, I'm sorry. The worst part was how I found out. Not from her, not from him. From a colleague who saw them together and felt bad for me. When I confronted her, she said exactly what Claire said, that it was my fault for being emotionally absent, for caring more about work than our relationship. His eyes met Victoria's. So when I saw Claire's interview, saw her trying to rewrite history and paint herself as the victim, it hit a nerve. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed his hand. For what it's worth, your ex sounds like an idiot. And so does your editor. Former editor. I quit that job the same day. Sebastian's smile was rueful. Best decision I ever made, actually. Went freelance, started choosing my own stories, stopped letting other people dictate my worth. Is that why you became an investigative journalist? To expose liars? Partly. But also because I like the truth. I like uncovering it, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. He studied her face. What about you? Corporate law, is that what you actually want to do, or is it what you fell into? Victoria opened her mouth to give her standard answer about finding legal work fulfilling, about the intellectual challenges of corporate transactions. But sitting in this dive bar, still riding the adrenaline from confronting Ethan, the lie wouldn't come. I hate it, she admitted. I've hated it for at least 2 years, maybe longer. But it's prestigious and pays well, and my parents were so proud when I got the job at Morrison & Associates that I couldn't bring myself to quit. What would you do if you could do anything? It was the second time in as many days that someone had asked her what she wanted, and Victoria still didn't have a good answer. She'd spent so long being who everyone expected her to be that she'd lost track of who she actually was. I don't know, she said honestly. When I was in college, I thought about teaching. Or maybe working for a nonprofit. Something that felt meaningful, you know? But then I got into law school, and everyone said corporate law was where the smart money was, and I just went along with it. It's not too late to change course. I'm 28 with a mortgage and student loans. It feels pretty late. You're 28 and single with no dependents, Sebastian corrected. You could literally do anything. Move to another country. Change careers. Buy a sailboat and live on the ocean. The only person stopping you is you. Victoria wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why she couldn't just upend her life. But the truth was, her life had already been upended. The wedding was off, her best friend was dead to her, and she'd just publicly humiliated herself and her ex on live television. What did she have to lose? Her phone buzzed again, this time, a call from her boss at Morrison & Associates. Victoria stared at the screen, her stomach sinking. "I have to take this," she told Sebastian. "Want me to give you privacy?" "No. Stay." She answered the call. "Hello, Richard." "Victoria." Richard Morrison's voice was clipped, professional. "I've been seeing some concerning videos online. You ambushed Ethan Corleone's press conference?" "I confronted my ex-fiancé about his very public betrayal, yes." "Victoria, Corleone Technologies is one of our biggest clients. Ethan personally brings us over $10 million in annual revenue." Victoria's blood ran cold. "Are you asking me to apologize to him?" "I'm asking you to consider the optics. Your personal issues with Ethan are spilling over into the professional sphere, and that's creating problems for the firm." "My personal issues?" Victoria's voice rose. "Richard, he cheated on me with my maid of honor and knocked her up. That's not a personal issue, that's a betrayal. Be that as it may, the firm has to maintain its relationship with Corleone Technologies. I'm going to have to ask you to take some time off. Paid leave, until this situation dies down. You're benching me because I embarrassed a client who happens to be my cheating ex-fiancé?" "I'm protecting the firm's interests," Richard said coldly. "Take 2 weeks, Victoria. Get your head together. We'll revisit your status after that." He hung up before she could respond. Victoria set her phone down carefully, afraid that if she wasn't careful, she'd throw it across the bar. "Let me guess," Sebastian said. "Your firm chose the lucrative client over you?" "Paid leave. 2 weeks to get my head together." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Apparently, publicly calling out my cheating ex is bad for business. So quit." "What? Quit?" Sebastian leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You just said you hate corporate law anyway. Your firm just showed you exactly where their loyalties lie, and it's not with you. So quit. Walk away. Find something that doesn't make you miserable." "I can't just quit. I have bills, responsibilities. You have savings. You have options. What you don't have is a good reason to stay at a job that makes you unhappy while working for people who don't value you." Sebastian's voice softened. "Victoria, 24 hours ago, you were about to marry someone who betrayed you in the worst way possible. But instead of falling apart, you're here, fighting back, taking control of your story. Don't stop now. Don't let fear trap you in another situation that's wrong for you." What would you do in Victoria's situation? Would you quit your job or play it safe? Let me know in the comments, I read every single one. Victoria stared at him, her mind racing. He was right. About all of it. She'd spent her whole life playing it safe, following the rules, and where had it gotten her? Alone, humiliated, and working for a firm that cared more about billable hours than her well-being. Maybe it was time to be reckless. "If I quit," she said slowly, "I'd need income. Something to tide me over while I figure out what's next." "I might have an idea about that," Sebastian said. "I'm working on a big investigation right now, corporate fraud, high-level corruption, the kind of thing that could take down some very powerful people. I could use a legal mind on the team. Someone who understands corporate structure and can help me navigate the documents." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a consulting gig. Freelance, so you keep your independence. It won't pay what Morrison does, but it'll cover your expenses while you figure out your next move." He paused. "And it'll be a hell of a lot more meaningful than helping rich people get richer." Victoria knew she should think about this rationally, should make a list of pros and cons, should consult with her parents and maybe a therapist. That's what old Victoria would do. But old Victoria had gotten her left at the altar. "Okay," she said. I'm in. Sebastian's smile was brilliant. Yeah? Yeah. I'll quit Morrison, I'll work with you on your investigation, and I'll figure out the rest as I go. Victoria felt lighter just saying it, like she'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. Let's burn it all down. They clinked glasses again, and this time when Victoria drank, it felt like celebrating instead of medicating. Her phone buzzed with a text from Josie. OMG Vic, you're everywhere. Mom is having a heart attack but Dad is proud. Also that British guy is hot. Are you going to sleep with him? Victoria glanced at Sebastian, who was scrolling through his own phone, probably reading the media reaction to the press conference. He looked up and caught her staring. What? Nothing. Just, thank you. For everything today. Don't thank me yet. We haven't even gotten to the fun part. This wasn't the fun part? Victoria, we've barely started. Sebastian's grin was wicked. By the time we're done, Ethan Corleone is going to wish he'd never met you. And for the first time since the wedding that wasn't, Victoria found herself looking forward to tomorrow. 3 days after the press conference ambush, Victoria was sitting in Sebastian's apartment in Brooklyn, surrounded by boxes of documents, her laptop, 3 empty coffee cups, and the growing realization that she'd drastically underestimated what she'd signed up for. Explain to me again why we're looking at shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, she asked, rubbing her tired eyes. Sebastian looked up from his own laptop, his hair even more disheveled than usual. He'd been working in the same hoodie for 2 days straight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleep was a distant memory. Somehow, he still looked unfairly attractive. Because tech venture capital has been funneling money through these shells for the past 18 months, and I need to prove it's connected to insider trading. He pulled up a spreadsheet. Look at the dates. Every single transfer happens exactly 2 weeks before a major acquisition announcement. Victoria leaned over to look at his screen, and her legal training kicked in automatically. That's circumstantial. You'd need to prove intent, show communication between the parties. Which is where these come in. Sebastian pulled out a folder of what looked like email printouts. Courtesy of a very nervous whistleblower who works in Tech Ventures' accounting department. Victoria started reading, her eyes widening as she processed what she was seeing. Holy shit. They're not even trying to hide it. Arrogance. They think they're untouchable. Sebastian's expression was grim. The CEO, Marcus, I meant David Chen, has been doing this for years. This is just the latest iteration. If we can prove this, Chen goes to prison. His whole company goes down. Now you're getting it. Sebastian smiled. See? More meaningful than reviewing merger contracts. He wasn't wrong. Victoria had done more substantive legal analysis in 3 days working with Sebastian than she had in the last 3 months at Morrison & Associates. And unlike her corporate work, this actually mattered. This would protect investors, expose corruption, maybe even prevent future fraud. What happens after we publish? Victoria asked. Chaos, probably. SEC investigation, shareholder lawsuits, criminal charges. Chen's life as he knows it ends. Sebastian paused. Why? Just making sure you're prepared for the fallout. People like Chen don't go down quietly. Neither do people like us. Sebastian's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding, maybe, or recognition. They were both fighters now, both people who'd been burned and come out sharper for it. Victoria's phone rang, breaking the moment. Her mother's number. She'd been avoiding Eleanor's calls since the press conference, not ready for the inevitable lecture about propriety and public image. I should take this, Victoria sighed. I'll make more coffee. Sebastian stood, stretching, and Victoria tried very hard not to notice how his shirt rode up, revealing a strip of toned stomach. She answered the call. Hi, Mom. Victoria Elizabeth Stratton. Eleanor's voice was tight. We need to talk. If this is about the press conference. It's not. Well, not entirely. Eleanor paused. Can you come to the house? There's something you need to see. Mom, I'm in the middle of. Please, Victoria. It's important. And it's about Ethan. Victoria's stomach dropped. What about him? Just come home. I'll explain when you get here. The call ended, leaving Victoria staring at her phone with growing unease. Her mother's voice had been strange, not angry, not disappointed, but something else. Worried, maybe. Or scared. Everything okay? Sebastian asked, returning with fresh coffee. I don't know. My mom wants me to come to Connecticut. Says it's about Ethan. Want company? Victoria looked at him, surprised. You drive 2 hours to Connecticut with me based on a cryptic phone call from my mother? I've done stranger things for a story. Plus, I'm curious. Sebastian grabbed his jacket. And you look like you could use backup. 40 minutes later, they were in Sebastian's car, a beat-up Toyota that had seen better days, heading north on I-95. Victoria spent the drive checking her phone compulsively, watching as the media circus around her confrontation with Ethan finally started to die down. Most of the coverage had been surprisingly sympathetic. #Team Victoria was trending, and several think pieces had been written about public betrayal and the double standards women faced when they dared to show anger. A few outlets had tried to paint her as unstable or vindictive, but they'd been drowned out by the overwhelming support. Claire, on the other hand, had gone silent. No more interviews, no social media posts. Just radio silence. Do you think she regrets it? Victoria asked suddenly. The interview, I mean. Or any of it? Sebastian glanced at her. Does it matter? I don't know. Maybe. Victoria watched the trees blur past her window. We were best friends for 20 years. That's longer than most marriages. And now she's just gone. It feels weird. You're allowed to miss her and still hate what she did. I don't think I miss her. I miss who I thought she was. But that person never really existed, did she? The real Claire is someone who could sleep with my fiancé and hide it for 6 months. People are complicated, Sebastian said. Sometimes the same person can be both your best friend and your betrayer. It's not either or. Victoria thought about that. About all the good memories she had with Claire, late-night conversations, road trips, supporting each other through breakups and job losses and family drama. Had all of that been fake? Or could it coexist with the betrayal? She didn't have an answer. They arrived at the Stratton estate just after noon. Eleanor was waiting in the foyer, and her face was drawn in a way Victoria had never seen before. Mom? What's wrong? Eleanor's eyes moved to Sebastian. And you are? Sebastian deckered. I'm a journalist working with Victoria. Of course you are. Eleanor's tone was dry. Victoria, we need to talk privately. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Sebastian. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but then she just sighed. Fine. Follow me. She led them to Robert's study, where Victoria's father was sitting behind his desk with an expression that made her nervous. Whatever this was, it was serious. Sit down, sweetheart, Robert said. Victoria sat. Sebastian remained standing, leaning against the bookshelf with his arms crossed. Eleanor pulled out a folder and set it on the desk. This morning, I received a package. No return address, just these documents and a note that said Victoria deserves to know the truth. What truth? Victoria reached for the folder, but her mother held it back. Before you look at these, I need you to understand something. Your father and we had concerns about Ethan from the beginning. Nothing concrete, just instincts. So we hired a private investigator. Victoria's blood ran cold. You what? 6 months ago, right after you got engaged, Robert said. We needed to know who you were marrying. You had no right. We had every right, Eleanor interrupted. You're our daughter. And it turns out our instincts were correct. She pushed the folder across the desk. Victoria opened it with shaking hands. Inside were photographs. Lots of them. Ethan with Claire, but not from 6 months ago. These were older. Much older. Victoria stared at a photo dated 2 years ago, Ethan and Claire having coffee at a cafe Victoria recognized. Another from 18 months ago, showing them entering a hotel together. Another from a year ago, leaving what looked like Claire's apartment building. I don't understand, Victoria whispered. There's more. Robert pulled out another document. Financial records. Ethan was paying Claire's rent for the past year and a half. He also paid off her credit card debt, $30,000, 14 months ago. The room tilted. Victoria gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. It wasn't one time, she said numbly. It was never one time. The pregnancy might have been accidental, Eleanor said gently. But the affair wasn't. They'd been together, on and off, for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. Sebastian moved closer, reading over Victoria's shoulder. Jesus Christ. Who sent this? Victoria asked. Who would have access to this information? We don't know, Robert admitted. But whoever it was, they wanted you to know what really happened. Victoria kept flipping through the photos, each one a fresh betrayal. Here was Ethan kissing Claire in a parking garage. Here they were holding hands at a restaurant in New Jersey, far enough from the city that they'd thought they wouldn't be recognized. Here was Claire getting into Ethan's car, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing. All of this while Victoria had been planning a wedding. While she'd been choosing flowers and cake flavors and writing vows that promised forever. They lied, Victoria said, her voice eerily calm. Claire's interview, where she said it was one drunken mistake, that was a complete fabrication. They've been having an affair for years. It appears so, Robert said. And the pregnancy? Was that part of the plan? I don't think so, Sebastian said, still reading the documents. Look at the timeline. The affair seemed to be winding down around 8 months ago, fewer meetings, less frequent contact. Then Claire got pregnant, and everything changed. Victoria saw what he meant. The surveillance records showed a gap of about 6 weeks where Ethan and Claire didn't see each other at all. Then, 7 months ago, there was a spike in contact again, multiple meetings, long phone calls. She told him about the pregnancy, and he panicked, Victoria said. But instead of calling off the wedding, he kept both relationships going, Sebastian added. Classic narcissist behavior. Couldn't stand to lose either option. Victoria thought about Claire's interview, about how she'd positioned herself as the tragic other woman who'd fallen in love despite herself. About Ethan's press conference, where he'd claimed it was a single mistake during a difficult time. All lies. Calculated, deliberate lies designed to minimize the damage to their reputations while throwing Victoria under the bus. I'm going to destroy them, Victoria said quietly. Eleanor and Robert exchanged glances. Victoria, her mother started. No. Victoria stood, the folder clutched in her hand. They don't get to control this narrative. They don't get to paint themselves as star-crossed lovers while I'm the cold, distant fiancé who drove Ethan away. I'm going to expose every single lie they've told. How? Robert asked. Victoria turned to Sebastian. Can you write another piece? Using these documents? Absolutely. But Victoria, if we publish this, there's no going back. This will completely destroy Claire and Ethan publicly. Their reputations will never recover. Good. Victoria's voice was ice. They deserve it. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Let's do it. They spent the rest of the afternoon at the estate, going through every document in the folder. Sebastian interviewed Victoria's parents about the private investigator, verified the authenticity of the surveillance photos, and built a timeline of the affair that was damning in its completeness. Victoria watched him work, impressed by his thoroughness. He wasn't just writing a hit piece, he was building an airtight case, the kind that couldn't be disputed or explained away. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said during a break while Sebastian was on the phone with his editor. "Of course," Eleanor said. She'd been uncharacteristically quiet, watching her daughter with worried eyes. "Did you know? Before you hired the investigator, did you suspect?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I suspected Ethan wasn't being entirely faithful, yes. The way he looked at other women when he thought no one was watching. The way he always needed to be the center of attention. But Claire?" She shook her head. "I never imagined it was Claire." "I should have seen it," Victoria said. "There were signs. The way they'd both get quiet when I walked into a room. How Claire always knew Ethan's schedule. The fact that she insisted on being my maid of honor even though we'd grown apart in the last year." She laughed bitterly. "I thought we'd grown apart because of her divorce. Turns out it was because she was sleeping with my fiancé." "This is not your fault," Robert said firmly. "You trusted people you loved." "That's not a character flaw, Victoria. That's human." But it felt like a flaw. It felt like Victoria had been walking through life with blinders on, seeing only what she wanted to see, ignoring every red flag because acknowledging them would have meant admitting her perfect life was a lie. Sebastian finished his call and came back to the table. "My editor wants to run the story tomorrow. Front page of the website, promoted on all social channels. It's going to be huge." "Will we get sued?" Victoria asked. "Possibly. Probably, actually. But everything in the piece is documented and verifiable. We have photographs, financial records, testimony from the private investigator. It's bulletproof." Sebastian looked at Victoria carefully. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Because once we publish, there's no taking it back." Victoria thought about Claire, who was pregnant and vulnerable. About how this story would follow her for the rest of her life, would probably follow her child too. Then she thought about Claire's interview, about the lies she'd told. About Ethan's press conference. About standing at that altar in her wedding dress, being humiliated in front of everyone she knew. "Publish it," Victoria said. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She kept checking her phone, waiting for Sebastian's article to go live. He'd sent her a draft for approval, and reading it had been both cathartic and devastating. The real story behind the wedding day chaos, a 2-year affair built on lies. The article laid out everything, the timeline of the affair, the financial support Ethan had provided Claire, the evidence that their one-time mistake narrative was completely fabricated. Sebastian had even gotten a comment from the private investigator, who confirmed the authenticity of all the surveillance materials. It was damning. It was thorough. And it was going to ruin them. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Sebastian, "Article goes live in 10 minutes. You okay?" She typed back, "No. But do it anyway." The 10 minutes crawled by. Victoria sat on her childhood bed, she'd decided to stay in Connecticut for the night, and watched the clock. At exactly midnight, Sebastian texted again, "It's live." Victoria pulled up the Guardian's website. There it was, the lead story, complete with a photo of Ethan and Claire from the surveillance records. The headline was stark and unforgiving. She read the article again, even though she'd already memorized it. Every paragraph was another nail in their coffins. By the time she finished, her phone was already blowing up. Messages from friends. From colleagues. From reporters asking for comment. And, finally, from Claire. "How could you do this? I'm pregnant, Victoria. You're going to destroy my baby's life before they're even born." Victoria stared at the message, feeling nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, nothing. She typed back, "You should have thought about that before you spent 2 years sleeping with my fiancé. Don't contact me again." Another message came through, this one from an unknown number, "You're a vindictive bitch. You're going to regret this." Ethan. It had to be. Victoria blocked the number and turned off her phone. There was a soft knock on her door. Vic? It's me. Josie. Victoria got up and opened the door, and her sister immediately wrapped her in a hug. I saw the article, Josie said. Holy shit, Vic. You went nuclear. They deserve it. They absolutely do. Josie pulled back, studying her sister's face. But how are you? I don't know, Victoria admitted. I keep waiting to feel guilty, but I just don't. Is that bad? Are you kidding? They lied to you for 2 years. They humiliated you publicly. They tried to rewrite history to make themselves look better. Josie shook her head. You didn't do anything wrong. You just told the truth. The truth is going to ruin them. Good. Let it. Josie sat on the bed. Can I tell you something? I never liked Ethan. I know I pretended to, because you loved him and I wanted to be supportive. But he always seemed fake to me. Too polished, too perfect. Like he was performing instead of being. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? Probably not. Victoria had been so invested in her vision of her perfect life that she'd ignored anyone who questioned it. What happens now? Josie asked. I don't know. Sebastian and I finished the investigation we're working on. I figure out what I actually want to do with my life. Victoria paused. Maybe I finally start living for myself instead of everyone else. About time. Josie grinned. Also, speaking of Sebastian, are you going to sleep with him? Oh my God, Josie. What? He's hot, he's smart, he clearly adores you, and you've got major chemistry. I'm just saying, rebound sex with a British journalist who helps you destroy your enemies? That's a romance novel plot right there. Victoria threw a pillow at her sister, but she was smiling despite herself. It's not like that with Sebastian. Yet. We're colleagues. Friends, maybe. But that's it. Even as she said it, Victoria wasn't entirely sure it was true. There was something between her and Sebastian, an intensity, a connection. The way he looked at her sometimes, like she was the most interesting thing in the room. The way her heart rate picked up when he smiled at her. But it was too soon. Too complicated. She'd just escaped one relationship disaster, she didn't need to jump into another one. Her phone buzzed again, she'd turned it back on to check for updates. This time, it was Sebastian calling. Sorry to call so late, he said when she answered. But you need to see this. See what? Check your email. Someone just sent me, and you, apparently, something explosive. I think it's from the same person who sent your parents those surveillance photos. Victoria opened her email, her heart pounding. There, in her inbox, was a message from an anonymous address with the subject line, the final piece of the puzzle. Attached was a single document. Victoria opened it, and her blood turned to ice. It was a contract. A prenuptial agreement, drafted 6 months ago, that she'd never seen before. Sebastian, she whispered. What am I looking at? Unless I'm reading this wrong, Sebastian said grimly, Ethan was planning to divorce you within a year of the wedding. There's a clause that would have given him complete control over your assets if the marriage ended before your first anniversary. Victoria scrolled through the document, her hands shaking. There, in legal language she understood perfectly from her corporate work, was a prenup designed to strip her of everything. Her inheritance, her savings, even her share of the apartment they'd bought together. He was going to marry me, take my money, and then divorce me, Victoria said numbly. It looks that way, yes. And Claire? There's a financial addendum. He was planning to set her up in a separate apartment after the wedding. Essentially, he was going to have both of you, and all your money. Victoria couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated fraud. A long con designed to rob her of her financial independence while keeping both her and Claire on the hook. "I'm going to kill him," Victoria said. "Get in line." Sebastian's voice was tight with fury. "Victoria, this changes everything. This isn't just an affair, this is premeditated financial fraud. We can bring criminal charges. Your father could use his connections." "No," Victoria interrupted. "I have a better idea." "What?" A plan was forming in Victoria's mind. Dangerous, possibly illegal, definitely satisfying. "Can you find out who's been sending these documents?" Victoria asked. "I can try." "Why?" "Because whoever it is clearly wants Ethan destroyed as much as I do. And I think it's time we joined forces." "Okay, who do you think is sending Victoria these documents? Drop your theories in the comments. And if you're loving this story, don't forget to subscribe, we're just getting to the best part." 2 days later, the world had become a battlefield, and Victoria's name was the flag planted on both sides. The article detailing the fraudulent prenup and the 2-year affair had gone viral on a global scale. #Ethan Corleone is over party was trending worldwide. Corleone Technologies stock had plummeted 23%, and a board of directors meeting had been called to discuss Ethan's future as CEO. Victoria and Sebastian were holed up in his Brooklyn apartment, which had become their war room. Empty takeout containers and piles of legal documents covered every surface. They were running on caffeine and adrenaline, trying to trace the IP address of their anonymous source. "I think I've got something," Sebastian said, his eyes glued to his screen. The emails are being sent through a series of encrypted relays, but the original signal is bouncing off a cell tower in a very specific location. He pointed to a map on his monitor. "A hospital. Specifically, the maternity ward at Lenox Hill." Victoria's breath caught. "The maternity ward? The hospital where Claire is supposed to deliver?" "Looks that way." "So the source is someone who works there? A doctor? A nurse? Or someone who's visiting?" Sebastian mused. "Someone who has a reason to be there and a reason to hate Ethan." The implication hung in the air between them. Could Claire herself be the source? Was it possible she was playing some kind of multi-layered game, leaking information to destroy Ethan while publicly playing the role of his devoted partner? It seemed too convoluted, too diabolical. "It doesn't make sense," Victoria said. "Why would she torpedo her own life and the father of her child?" "Unless she felt trapped," Sebastian suggested. "Maybe she realized Ethan was just using her, and this was her only way out." Before they could explore the theory further, there was a loud, authoritative knock on the door. It wasn't the pizza delivery they were expecting. Sebastian's and Victoria's eyes met. He moved silently to the door, peering through the peephole. His shoulders tensed. "Who is it?" Victoria whispered. "Trouble." He opened the door to find 2 grim-faced men in dark suits holding up badges. "Sebastian Deckard?" one of them asked. "Yes?" "Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We have an order to detain you. Your journalist visa has been revoked, effective immediately." Victoria's blood ran cold. "On what grounds?" she demanded, moving to stand beside Sebastian. "Activities inconsistent with the terms of your visa and engaging in actions deemed detrimental to the interests of a U.S. corporation," the agent recited, his voice flat. He wasn't looking at Sebastian, he was looking at Victoria. The message was clear. This was about her. This was Ethan's revenge. "That's a bogus charge and you know it," Sebastian said, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He was a British citizen. He had no rights here, not really. "You can appeal the decision from your home country," the other agent said. "But for now, you need to come with us. You're being processed for immediate deportation." "Immediate?" Victoria's voice shook. "You can't just deport him. He has rights, due process." "Ma'am, I suggest you step aside." The agent's tone was firm. "No." Victoria stood her ground. "I'm his attorney." You can't question him without me present. Sebastian put a hand on her arm. Vic, don't. It won't work. This is an administrative order, not a criminal one. They've got me. His eyes were full of a fury and helplessness that mirrored her own. He did this. Ethan did this. I'll fight it, Victoria promised, her voice thick with unshed tears. I'll call my father, I'll get the best immigration lawyers in the city. There's no time, Sebastian said, his voice low and urgent as the agents began to lead him out. He's taking me off the board so he can come after you. Don't let him win. Find the source. Finish the investigation. Don't let this be for nothing. Sebastian. He was already being escorted down the hallway. He looked back at her one last time, his face a mask of frustration and fear. Be careful, Victoria. Then he was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving Victoria alone in the wreckage of their investigation. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The one person who'd had her back, the one person she had started to trust, to care for, was gone. Ethan had taken him from her. She sank onto the sofa, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. It was over. She was alone. Ethan had won. He was a billionaire with endless resources and a vindictive streak a mile wide. What could she possibly do against him now? Her deepest fear, the one she'd been running from since she stood on that altar, settled over her like a shroud. She was powerless. Her phone rang, the screen displaying an unknown number. She knew who it was before she answered. Hello, Ethan. I see you got my message, he said. His voice was cold, stripped of all the fake contrition he'd shown at the press conference. This was the real Ethan. I told you you'd regret this, Victoria. Your little reporter friend is on a plane back to London by now. You're next. What are you going to do? Have me deported from my own country? Don't be stupid. I own half this city. I can make sure you never work in law again. I can bury you in lawsuits until you're bankrupt. I can destroy your father's reputation. You came after me. Now I'm coming after you. And this time, you're all alone. Despair, thick and suffocating, washed over Victoria. He was right. She was alone. Her friends were gone, her career was in jeopardy, and the one man who had given her the courage to fight had just been ripped away. The situation was hopeless. You should have just taken the money and kept your mouth shut, Vic, Ethan said, his voice laced with venom. You could have had a nice, quiet divorce. But you had to make it a war. And you just lost. He hung up. Victoria sat in the silence, staring at the map on Sebastian's computer screen. The blinking dot over Lenox Hill Hospital seemed to mock her. The key to everything was right there, but she had no way to get to it, no one to help her. She was trapped, isolated, and utterly defeated. For an hour, Victoria sat motionless on Sebastian's sofa, the silence of the apartment amplifying the sound of Ethan's victorious parting words. You just lost. He was right. She was outmaneuvered, isolated, and facing an enemy with limitless power. The fight was over. She picked up her phone, her fingers numbly opening a travel app. London. She could fly to London. She could find Sebastian, figure out a new life, and leave this whole disaster behind. It was the only move she had left, to run. But as she stared at the flight options, Sebastian's last words echoed in her mind. Don't let him win. Don't let this be for nothing. He had been taken, his life upended, because he had tried to help her. Running away wouldn't just be admitting defeat, it would be a betrayal of his sacrifice. The despair that had been suffocating her slowly began to curdle into a cold, hard rage. Ethan had taken her fiancé, her best friend, her career, and now the one person who'd made her feel strong again. He would not take her fight. Just as she closed the travel app, her phone buzzed with an encrypted call from an international number. Her heart leaped. Sebastian? Took me a while to get a secure line, he said. His voice was tired but sharp, crackling with urgency from an ocean away. "Are you okay?" "What did he do?" "He called. Threatened me, my family. He thinks he's won." Tears of frustration and relief pricked her eyes. "They're deporting you." "I'm so sorry, Sebastian, this is all my fault." "Stop. This is not your fault," he cut in, his tone firm. "This is Ethan's. And we are not letting him win. I've been a bloody idiot. I was so focused on the where, I didn't think to cross-reference the who." "What are you talking about?" "The source. Our whistleblower at the hospital. Before they took me, I ran a search through the hospital staff database against names from the PI report your parents had. I was looking for a connection to Claire." "Did you find one?" "No," Sebastian said, and Victoria could almost hear his grim smile. "I found something better. Do you remember I told you about the girl Ethan cheated on at Oxford? The one whose roommate he slept with?" Victoria's memory flashed back to the dive bar. "Yes. Sophie. Her name wasn't Sophie. I used a pseudonym to protect her. Her real name is Anna Shaw. And guess where Dr. Anna Shaw, MD, has been a resident in obstetrics for the last 2 years?" The world snapped into focus. "Lenox Hill." "Bingo," Sebastian said. "She's our source." She saw Claire's name on the patient list, recognized Ethan's name as the father, and decided it was time for some long-overdue justice. She's the one who sent everything. She has the motive, the access, and the anger. Hope, fierce and brilliant, surged through Victoria. They weren't beaten. They had an ally on the inside. "Sebastian, you're a genius." "I'm a journalist who got deported," he said wryly. "Listen, you need to find her. Talk to her. She must have more. Something definitive that we can use to nail him. But you can't go alone. Ethan will be watching you. I know who to call." As soon as she hung up with Sebastian, Victoria dialed her sister. "Josie," she said, her voice steady and clear for the first time in hours. "I need your help. How do you feel about a little corporate espionage?" "Oh, thank God," Josie said, relief palpable in her voice. "I was worried you'd given up." "I'm on my way." "What's the plan?" "The plan is we're going to the hospital. We're going to find a woman named Anna Shaw. And we are going to burn Ethan Corleone's empire to the ground." "I'll bring the matches," Josie replied without a moment's hesitation. Victoria stood up, squaring her shoulders. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but the determination was stronger. Ethan had separated her from Sebastian, thinking it would break her. He was wrong. He'd only given her a reason to fight harder. This wasn't just for her anymore. It was for Sebastian, too. It was for justice. And as Josie burst through the door 20 minutes later, eyes bright with righteous fury, Victoria knew she wasn't alone after all. The final confrontation was coming. The obstetrics wing of Lenox Hill was a world of hushed tones and quiet anticipation, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in Victoria's life. Following a series of coded texts, she and Josie were led by a nurse to a small, private consultation room. A moment later, a woman with intelligent, weary eyes and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun walked in. She wore blue scrubs and a doctor's coat embroidered with the name A. Shaw, MD. "Victoria Stratton," Anna Shaw said, her voice low and direct. "I'm sorry for how we're meeting. And I'm sorry for what Ethan did to you. He did the same to me." "Sebastian told me," Victoria replied, her own voice quiet. "Thank you for what you've done. For sending the evidence." "He deserves to be exposed," Anna said, her jaw tight. "But I have something more. Something final." She placed a small digital audio recorder on the table. "Claire Harrison is my patient." When the story about the prenup broke, she became terrified. She realized Ethan wasn't protecting her, he was controlling her. "She knows she's a loose end. She confessed everything to me, hoping I could help her." "Everything about the affair?" Josie asked. Everything about the insider trading, Anna corrected, and Victoria's heart stopped. For the last 2 years, Ethan has been using her. He'd give her stock tips, non-public information from his company's acquisitions, and have her make trades through a brokerage account he controlled. He used her as a cutout to commit wire fraud. It's all on this recording. A full confession. Victoria stared at the recorder. It was the silver bullet. A direct link to a federal crime, confessed by his accomplice. This is enough to send him to prison for decades. The board of directors is meeting in 1 hour to vote on his removal as CEO, Anna said. Claire told me. If he can charm them, he might survive. But if they hear this. A plan, sharp and brilliant, crystallized in Victoria's mind. He won't just be removed. He'll be arrested. She looked at Josie, whose eyes were already gleaming with understanding. I need a distraction. A big one. An hour later, the lobby of Corleone Technologies was pure chaos. Josie, wearing a fur coat over a cocktail dress, was standing on a reception desk, screaming about her emotional support peacock being denied entry. She'd thrown a handful of glitter into the air, causing a frenzy as security guards scrambled to contain the bizarre, fabulous scene. While every guard was focused on the peacock lady, Victoria swiped her old executive access card, which Ethan had never bothered to deactivate, and slipped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 40th floor boardroom. She could hear Ethan's voice through the frosted glass doors, smooth and confident, trying to talk his way out of the fire. Victoria took a deep breath, clutching the small recorder. This was for her. This was for Sebastian. She pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. 20 of the most powerful people in finance turned to stare at her. Ethan, standing at the head of the table, froze, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Victoria, he hissed. Get out. I don't think so, she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. She walked to the center of the table and placed the recorder down. You've all heard the story about Ethan's personal life. But you're here to discuss business, so let's do that. Let's discuss the pattern of insider trading he's been running for the last 2 years using shell accounts, a scheme currently under investigation by Sebastian Deckard, the journalist Ethan had illegally deported. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. These are baseless accusations, one of them said. Are they? Victoria smiled, a cold, sharp thing. Then you won't mind hearing a confession from one of his key accomplices. She pressed play. Claire's terrified, sobbing voice filled the multi-million-dollar boardroom. She detailed everything, dates, stock tickers, account numbers. She explained how Ethan would feed her information and direct her trades, how he'd promised her a future and then threatened her when she got pregnant. Ethan lunged for the recorder, but 2 of the larger board members blocked his path. His face had gone ashen, the charming facade crumbling to reveal the desperate criminal beneath. The recording ended. Silence. That recording, along with corroborating bank records, has been sent to the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office, Victoria stated, her voice like ice. Your company is now the subject of a massive federal investigation. You can either cooperate by removing Mr. Corleone and turning over all evidence, or you can go down with him. As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it wasn't Josie. It was 2 FBI agents. Ethan Corleone, one of them said, his voice booming. You're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Ethan stared at Victoria, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost primal. He had lost. She had won. Not with hysterics or revenge, but with intelligence, courage, and the truth. As they cuffed him, his empire crumbling around him, Victoria felt no joy. Only a profound, quiet relief. Justice. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the chaos behind. She didn't look back. In the lobby, she found Josie calmly negotiating with a bewildered security chief, glitter still sparkling in her hair. You miss all the fun? Josie asked with a grin. He's been arrested, Victoria said. Josie's grin widened. Then I'd say the fun is just getting started. She slung an arm around her sister. Come on, hero. Let's go get you a drink. You've earned it. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the sunlit office of the Stratton Justice Initiative, a non-profit she'd founded with her father's backing to provide pro bono legal aid to victims of financial fraud. The space was modest, a world away from the gleaming towers of Morrison and Associates, but it felt more like home than any corner office ever could. She was no longer the woman in the Vera Wang dress, she was a fighter, wearing a simple blouse and a genuine smile. The chaos of her non-wedding had receded into a story she could finally tell without flinching. Ethan Corleone had been convicted on all charges, his charm failing him in a federal courtroom. He was facing a 20-year prison sentence. His company had been restructured, his name scrubbed from its letterhead. Claire, having testified against him, received a sentence of probation. She'd had her baby, a boy, and moved to the Midwest to start a new, quiet life. Victoria hadn't spoken to her, but she'd made her peace with it. Forgiveness was too complex a word, but acceptance felt right. Her own life, once a meticulously planned roadmap, was now an open-ended adventure. The viral fame had faded, leaving behind something more valuable, a reputation for being a woman who fought back. The bell on the office door chimed, and she looked up from the case file she was reading. Standing in the doorway, looking entirely out of place and yet perfectly at home, was Sebastian Deckard. Her breath caught. They had spoken every day since his deportation, on encrypted calls, through coded emails, a lifeline across the Atlantic. But seeing him in person, his familiar rumpled suit and the tired but triumphant look in his green eyes, sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with him. The ICE order was rescinded, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Turns out when the billionaire who bribed a politician to have you deported goes to prison, the paperwork gets a lot less sticky. Victoria crossed the room in 3 quick strides and launched herself into his arms. He caught her, his arms wrapping tightly around her waist, and buried his face in her hair. She could smell his familiar scent, cologne, coffee, and a hint of a long-haul flight. It was the scent of safety, of partnership, of home. You're here, she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I'm here, he confirmed. I told you I'd come back. She pulled away just enough to look at him. So, what's next for the famous investigative journalist? Well, he said, his thumbs gently stroking her waist. I was thinking of opening a U.S. bureau. I've got a lead on a new story, and it seems like I'm going to need a top-notch legal consultant. His eyes were full of a warmth that made her heart ache in the best possible way. And, I was hoping she might also be free for dinner. Maybe a second date. I hear the first one at the non-wedding was a bit of a disaster. Victoria laughed, a real, joyful sound. I think I can clear my schedule. The space between them crackled with 6 months of unspoken feelings, of late-night calls that were about more than just legal strategy. He had been her rock, her co-conspirator, her friend. Now, standing here, she knew he was something more. Vic, he said, his voice suddenly serious. She cut him off by pressing her lips to his. The kiss was everything their relationship had been, a slow burn of friendship exploding into something undeniable. It was desperate and gentle, a thank you and a promise all at once. It tasted of relief, of justice won, and of a future she hadn't known she wanted until he'd walked into her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. So, I take it the feeling's mutual? You're an idiot, Sebastian Deckard, she whispered with a smile. I know, he said, and kissed her again. But I'm your idiot. Standing there, wrapped in his arms, Victoria Stratton knew she had finally found her new beginning. It wasn't the one she had planned, but it was real, it was earned, and it was so much better. The chaos had passed, and in its place was a quiet, profound joy. She was free. She was in love. And her story was just getting started. And that, my beautiful friends, is a wrap. What a journey. Thank you so much for watching and for being the most incredible community a storyteller could ask for. If you loved this story as much as I loved creating it, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more tales of love, suspense, and sweet, sweet justice. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.